Not everything that calls your name should be answered. Not every door that opens should be walked through. By the time the air shifted, by the time the laughter faded from her lips, she knew. The drink in her hand felt heavier than it should. The room was too quiet. Too still. And the man who had seemed so kind, so familiar, was looking at her now with a hunger that was no longer masked by smiles. The trap had already been set. The walls had already closed in. And somewhere beyond that locked door, beyond the silence that would soon swallow her screams, something in the night was listening. Waiting. Because once you step into the darkness, it never lets you go. Nkembe was a place of opportunity, where the hardworking thrived and the desperate often sought shortcuts to wealth. In the heart of this restless town lived Amoka, a young woman full of life, whose laughter could brighten the darkest alley. She had dreams bigger than Nkembe, bigger than the limits her humble background placed upon her. But she also had a heart that believed in the kindness of strangers, and that, more than anything else, would become her undoing. It all started with a friend request on social media. A man named Sadiq had sent her a request, and after a brief scroll through his profile, she saw nothing suspicious. His photos were decent, some taken at tourist attractions, a few showing him in neat, well-ironed outfits. His posts were mostly inspirational quotes and messages about hard work. He wasn't like the usual men who filled her inbox with empty compliments or crude messages. He was different. He spoke with respect, asked about her day, sent her words of encouragement when she needed them. Their conversations grew frequent, and over time, Amoka found herself looking forward to his messages. "You have the spirit of a queen," he once told her. "A woman like you deserves the best in life." The words warmed her heart, not because she hadn't heard compliments before, but because, for once, someone seemed to see more than just her beauty. He saw her mind, her struggles, her dreams. Or so she thought. One evening, as she scrolled through her phone after a long day, a message from Sadiq popped up. "Amoka, I have something important to discuss with you. Can we meet?" She hesitated. They had never met in person before, though he had suggested it multiple times. Something about his sudden urgency felt strange. "What is it?" she replied. "I'd rather tell you in person. It's about an opportunity. Trust me, you won't regret it." Amoka frowned, her instincts telling her to be cautious. But then again, hadn't he been nothing but kind and respectful all this time? She decided to hear him out. "All right. Where do we meet?" He sent her an address, a small lodge on the outskirts of town. "It's quiet there. We can talk without distractions." That was the first red flag. But Amoka, eager to believe in the good of people, ignored it. The next evening, she told her younger brother she would be out for a while and left for the meeting. The roads leading to the lodge were eerily empty, and the building itself seemed worn out, its once white walls now a dull shade of brown. She hesitated before knocking. The door opened almost instantly, and Sadiq stood there, smiling warmly. "You came," he said, stepping aside. Something about the way he said it unsettled her, but she forced a smile and walked in. The room was modest, just a couch, a table, and a dimly lit bulb hanging from the ceiling. On the table sat 2 cups and a bottle of soft drink. "Sit," Sadiq offered, pouring the drink into the cups. "You must be thirsty." Amoka hesitated before taking a sip. It tasted normal, refreshing even. But within minutes, a wave of dizziness crashed over her. The room blurred, her body slumped against the couch, and the last thing she saw was Sadiq watching her with a cold, knowing smile. Darkness swallowed her whole. When she woke, her hands were tied behind her back, her feet bound together. Panic surged through her veins as she tried to move, but the ropes were tight. Her head pounded, her vision still hazy. The room was different now. Dimly lit candles lined the corners, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air smelled of something metallic, something foul. And then she saw it, the bowl of dark liquid sitting in the center of the room, and beside it, a sharp, gleaming knife. Sadiq stood over her, no longer the charming man she had come to know, but a predator ready to strike. "Don't fight," he said, his voice devoid of the warmth it once carried. "It will be easier that way." Her heart slammed against her chest as the horrifying realization set in. This was no ordinary meeting. She was not here for an opportunity. She was here as an offering. And the ritual was about to begin. Amoka's breath came in ragged gasps as she fought against the ropes binding her wrists, her fingers growing numb from the effort. The dim candlelight flickered against the cracked walls of the room, casting shadows that danced like sinister spirits preparing for a feast. Sadiq's face, once familiar and warm, had transformed into something unrecognizable, a mask of cold detachment, his eyes gleaming with an eerie determination. He moved with unsettling precision, his fingers tracing the intricate markings drawn in chalk across the dusty floor. At the center of the ritual space sat a large clay bowl filled with a thick, dark liquid. The metallic scent that lingered in the air made Amoka's stomach churn. She knew then that whatever was about to happen, it would not end in kindness. "Sadiq, please," she choked out, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to do this." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned to a small, tattered book resting on a wooden stool nearby. The pages were filled with ancient symbols, their meanings unknown to her but their purpose clear enough. This was a ritual of power, of sacrifice. He finally spoke, his voice devoid of emotion. "It's not personal, Amoka. You were just convenient." The words struck her like a physical blow. The weeks of careful conversations, the slow build of trust, the kind words, had it all been a lie? Had she been nothing more than a pawn in a game she hadn't even known she was playing? Sadiq picked up the gleaming knife beside the bowl and stepped closer. "It is said that the first sacrifice must be given willingly," he murmured, running his fingers along the edge of the blade. "But if not willingly, then with enough force, the spirits will still accept." He crouched before her, his face inches from hers. "Do you believe in the supernatural, Amoka?" Her mind screamed at her to stay calm, to think. She had heard whispers in Kembe about dark rituals performed in hidden places, about men who sought wealth through the shedding of innocent blood. But those had always been distant rumors, the kind of tales old women told to frighten children into behaving. Never had she imagined she would be at the heart of one. Tears stung her eyes. "You don't have to do this," she repeated. "There has to be another way." Sadiq sighed, almost as if her pleas exhausted him. "You think I haven't tried?" he asked. "You think I woke up one day and decided this was the answer?" He stood abruptly, his grip tightening around the handle of the knife. "Do you know what it's like to grow up with nothing? To be reminded every day that no matter how hard you work, you will always be a step behind those who were born into comfort." His voice grew sharper, filled with a bitterness that ran deep. "I did everything the right way, Amoka. I studied. I worked. And yet, I watched as men who were willing to take shortcuts surpassed me, living lives I could only dream of. I decided I would no longer be the one left behind." Her stomach twisted. "And you think killing me will fix that?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small vial filled with a red substance, blood, she realized with horror. He tilted it over the bowl, letting the liquid mix with the dark contents inside. A gust of wind rattled the wooden walls of the room, though there were no windows open. The air grew thick, heavy with something unseen. Even Sadiq seemed taken aback for a moment, his fingers trembling slightly as he set the vial down. The room felt colder now, the candle flames dancing wildly as if caught in an invisible storm. Then, a whisper, soft at first, like the rustling of leaves. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Amoka's breath hitched. She wasn't imagining this. She wasn't alone with Sadiq. He turned towards the center of the ritual space, his posture stiffening. "They are here," he murmured. The whisper grew into a chorus, voices layered upon voices, speaking in a language Amoka didn't understand. The markings on the floor glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. A shadow slithered along the wall, stretching unnaturally, its form twisting and shifting. Sadiq's eyes widened. This wasn't what he had expected. Amoka saw the moment doubt crept into his expression, and she seized it. "Sadiq, you don't know what you're dealing with," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "These things, they don't give without taking." He clenched his jaw, shaking off whatever uncertainty had momentarily gripped him. "I know exactly what I'm doing." But the flicker of hesitation was still there. Then, the air in the room snapped like a taut string breaking. The candles went out all at once, plunging them into near darkness, save for the faint glow of the markings. The whispers turned into distorted murmurs, rising and falling in intensity. And then, the voice. Not like the whispers, but deep, ancient, resonating through the very bones of the room. "Sadiq," it called. He stiffened. "I am here," he answered, his voice cracking slightly. The shadows on the wall moved, coiling like living tendrils. "You seek wealth, power, influence." The voice stretched the words, each syllable sending a shiver down Amoka's spine. "And you offer her in return." Sadiq swallowed hard. "Yes. She is my sacrifice." Silence followed. Then, the voice chuckled, a low, guttural sound that made Amoka's blood run cold. "Foolish child," it whispered, almost amused. "Did you think you could command us? That we would bow to your desires so easily?" Sadiq's breath quickened. "I have done everything as instructed. I have followed the text." The shadow slithered closer, and the voice darkened. "You have failed to understand, mortal. The one who spills the blood is bound to the offering. Their fates entwined. To take her life is to tether your own." Sadiq's face twisted in confusion. "No, that's not what the book said." The laughter returned, louder this time. "Books lie. We do not." Amoka's heart pounded as she watched the panic seep into Sadiq's features. He looked down at the knife in his hands, then at her, realization dawning like a slow-moving nightmare. "No, no, this isn't how it's supposed to go." The shadows lunged. The moment they touched him, Sadiq let out a strangled scream. His body jerked violently, his fingers convulsing as if something unseen had taken hold of him. The air rippled, and suddenly, he was lifted off the ground by an invisible force. His scream grew raw, desperate. Amoka could do nothing but watch. The shadows coiled around him, dragging him towards the center of the ritual space. His eyes met hers, no longer filled with arrogance, but with pure, unfiltered terror. "Help me," he choked out. The spirits did not grant him mercy. With a final, ear-splitting shriek, Sadiq was pulled into the darkness. And just like that, he was gone. The room fell silent, the air still heavy with the remnants of something ancient and unforgiving. Then, as if nothing had happened, the candles flickered back to life. The markings on the floor faded. The ritual was over. Amoka's body shook violently as she struggled against her restraints, her mind barely able to process what she had just witnessed. Whatever had taken Sadiq had spared her. But why? And more importantly, would it come back? The silence after Sadiq's disappearance was deafening. Amoka's heart pounded wildly against her ribcage as she remained bound, her entire body trembling from shock and exhaustion. The air around her still felt heavy, as though the room had not yet rid itself of whatever force had consumed him. Though the ritual markings had faded and the candle flames flickered once more, a presence lingered, watching, waiting. Amoka knew she was not yet free. The spirits had taken Sadiq, but something told her that the ritual was not over. Her mind screamed for her to move, to escape before whatever had been summoned turned its gaze upon her, but the ropes held her in place. Her fingers were numb, her wrist bruised from struggling earlier. She forced herself to take deep breaths, trying to focus. Think, Amoka. Think. The spirits had said that the one who spills the blood is bound to the offering. Sadiq was gone. Did that mean she was safe? A sudden gust of wind swept through the room, despite the absence of windows or an open door. The candles flickered violently, their flames stretching unnaturally high before settling again. A deep, guttural voice resonated through the walls, no longer whispering, but clear and commanding. The debt remains unpaid. Amoka's breath caught in her throat. She turned her head sharply, her pulse thudding in her ears. The shadows in the corners of the room thickened, twisting into forms that were neither solid nor entirely immaterial. They hovered, shifting with each flicker of the candles, as though deciding what to do with her. Please, she rasped, her throat dry. I did not come here willingly. I was tricked. The voice hummed, neither agreeing nor dismissing her plea. Blood was promised. A sacrifice was prepared. Yet the ritual remains incomplete. Amoka's blood turned to ice. She had assumed that with Sadiq gone, she was no longer in danger. But now she realized the truth, his offering had failed, and she was still at the mercy of whatever force he had summoned. If the spirits required a life, would they now take hers? You must finish what was started, the voice declared. Tears welled in Amoka's eyes. No. Please, I have done nothing. I don't want any part of this. A chilling laugh echoed through the room, though there was no physical being to produce it. It is not about what you want. The contract was sealed the moment your blood touched his hands. The burden is now yours. Amoka felt her breath hitch. The spirits were not bound to Sadiq alone, they were bound to the ritual itself. And with Sadiq's disappearance, the responsibility of fulfilling the ritual had shifted to her. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She had two choices: either she found a way to complete the ritual in the way the spirits demanded, or she found another way to break the contract before they claimed her as payment. Her stomach twisted at the thought. The very idea of harming another person was unthinkable. She couldn't do what Sadiq had planned. But if she didn't, what would the spirits do to her? She had to escape. Summoning every ounce of strength, she started tugging at the ropes again, ignoring the pain in her wrist. The air in the room thickened, pressing down on her like a tangible force. The spirits were growing impatient. A deep rumbling filled the space, as though the walls themselves were groaning in frustration. You will not leave until the ritual is complete. A sudden, sharp pain shot through her body, making her cry out. It felt as though invisible hands were gripping her, pinning her down with a force she couldn't see. The pressure increased, squeezing her ribs, making it harder to breathe. She gasped, struggling against the unseen force. Please, she begged. There must be another way. The air stilled for a moment, as though the spirits were considering her words. Then, the voice spoke again. A life must be taken. But it does not have to be yours. Amoka froze. They were giving her a way out, but at a cost. The price of her survival was the life of another. No, she whispered, shaking her head. I won't do it. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. The candles extinguished all at once, plunging her into darkness. The presence around her grew heavier, suffocating. The voice thundered, then the debt will be paid in your blood. A force slammed into her chest, knocking the air from her lungs. She gasped, feeling her body being dragged toward the center of the ritual space. The markings on the floor reignited in an eerie glow, pulsing like a heartbeat. Shadows swirled around her, tightening like a noose. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. Was this it? Was this how it would end? Then, a sudden crash shattered the suffocating silence. The door burst open, and a figure rushed into the room. A man, tall, with broad shoulders and eyes that burned with determination. Amoka. His voice cut through the haze of terror, grounding her. Ikin. Her heart clenched with relief. He had come for her. How had he known? The spirits recoiled at his presence, their swirling forms retreating toward the corners of the room. The force holding her down loosened slightly, enough for her to gasp for air. You cannot interfere, the voice growled. The contract must be fulfilled. Ikin ignored the warning, moving swiftly to untie her bindings. His grip was strong, steady. We need to get out of here, he muttered, his voice low but urgent. Amoka barely had time to process before he yanked her to her feet. The shadows surged forward as if to stop them, but Ikin pulled something from his pocket, a small vial filled with a white powder. He flung it into the air, and the moment the substance touched the ground, the spirits let out an ear-piercing shriek. The room shook violently, the ritual markings flickering erratically. Now! Ikin shouted, dragging her toward the door. They stumbled into the night, Amoka's legs barely able to keep up. The air outside was cold, crisp, so different from the oppressive heat inside the lodge. But they didn't stop running. Not until the building was far behind them, swallowed by the darkness of the night. Only then did Ikin slow down, his chest heaving from exertion. He turned to her, his gaze filled with urgency. Are you hurt? Amoka shook her head, though her entire body ached. How did you know where to find me? You didn't come home, he said simply. I asked around, and someone saw you heading toward the outskirts of town. Something felt wrong, so I came looking. Tears burned in her eyes. If he had been even a few minutes late, she didn't want to think about what would have happened. But even as she stood there, shaken but alive, a chilling realization settled over her. The ritual was still unfinished. And the spirits would not stop haunting her until the debt was paid. She had escaped the lodge, but she had not escaped the curse. The night air did little to calm Amoka's trembling body as she and Ikin stood outside the abandoned lodge. The weight of what had just transpired pressed down on her like a heavy cloak, each breath she took reminding her that she had escaped by the slimmest of margins. But the danger had not passed, not entirely. The ritual was still unfinished. The spirits had given their warning, and Amoka knew that the unseen forces she had encountered would not simply disappear. They would come for her. Ikin placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, his face etched with concern. We need to leave this place. Now. Amoka nodded numbly, her body still weak from the ordeal. They hurried away from the lodge, their footsteps hurried and uneven against the dirt path. The village was still some distance away, but every step forward felt like a battle against the shadows that clung to the trees, whispering threats that only Amoka could hear. She wasn't sure if the voices were in her mind or if something truly lurked in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to strike. Where do we go? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't go home. The spirits said the ritual isn't over. They'll keep coming for me. Ikin's jaw tightened. We'll find a way to break the curse. There has to be a way. But Amoka wasn't sure. The spirits had demanded a life in exchange for power. Sadiq had attempted to sacrifice her, and in return, he had been taken. But with him gone, the debt remained unpaid. And if she refused to complete the ritual, she feared the spirits would not only come for her, but for anyone close to her. They reached the outskirts of the village just as dawn began to break, the sky painted in hues of deep purple and gold. The marketplace was still empty, the silence offering a false sense of peace. Ikin led her to a small, isolated compound at the far end of the village. "This is my uncle's house. He's away on business, so it's empty. You can stay here until we figure things out." Amoka stepped inside, the simple room offering a much-needed refuge. She sank onto a mat on the floor, burying her face in her hands. What if there's no way out? What if I have no choice but to finish the ritual? Ikin knelt beside her. "There is always a choice, Amoka. We just have to find another way." But the spirits did not believe in alternatives. That night, the air grew thick with an unnatural stillness. The wind, which usually carried the sounds of crickets and rustling leaves, had vanished, leaving behind a silence that felt oppressive. Amoka lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding in her chest. Then, it began. A faint whisper slithered through the room, curling around her ears like a snake. It spoke no words, just an eerie hum that sent chills down her spine. She sat up abruptly, her breath catching in her throat. The shadows in the corners of the room stretched and shifted, twisting into unnatural shapes. The spirits had found her. A sudden force pressed against her chest, stealing the air from her lungs. She gasped, clawing at her throat as invisible hands tightened around her. Her vision blurred, her body thrashing against a presence she could not see. The weight grew heavier, pinning her to the mat, her screams trapped inside her mind. Then, as quickly as it had begun, it stopped. The pressure lifted, and Amoka sucked in a desperate breath, her body shaking violently. A voice, deep, ancient, and filled with malice, echoed through the room. "The debt must be paid." Tears streamed down Amoka's face as she scrambled backward, pressing herself against the wall. "Please. I didn't ask for this. It wasn't me." The shadows recoiled, but the voice remained. "You bear the mark. The sacrifice was yours to take. It remains unfulfilled." Amoka shook her head frantically. "No. Take it from someone else. Anyone else." A low, rumbling laugh filled the space. "A life for a life, child. Deny us, and we shall take from you instead." The temperature in the room dropped, her breath visible in the freezing air. Then, just as suddenly as they had come, the spirits withdrew, leaving behind an overwhelming emptiness. Amoka slumped forward, her body drenched in sweat, her limbs weak from terror. She had been given a final warning. If she did not fulfill the ritual, they would come for her, and they would not stop until they had taken what they were owed. The next morning, Ikin found her sitting outside, her face pale and hollow. He crouched beside her, worry etched deep into his features. "What happened?" She swallowed hard. "They came. They told me if I don't finish the ritual, they'll take me instead." Ikin exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. "Then we need to find another way." "There is no other way," she snapped, her voice breaking. "They demand a life, Ikin. If I don't give them one, they'll take mine." Ikin was silent for a moment. Then, his eyes darkened with determination. "What if we can trick them?" Amoka frowned. "What do you mean?" "The spirits were bound to Sadiq's ritual, right?" he said. "What if we disrupt it? What if we break the connection before they can claim you?" Amoka's heart thudded with a fragile hope. "But how?" Ikin hesitated. "There's an elder in the next village. People say he knows how to deal with dark spirits. If anyone can help us, it's him." Amoka wasn't sure if she believed in such things, but she had no other options. "Then let's go." They traveled for hours, the path winding through dense forests and across shallow rivers. Every shadow felt like a threat, every gust of wind a whisper from the spirits that haunted her. By the time they reached the elder's compound, the sun was beginning to set. The man they sought was old, his skin lined with the wisdom of years. He sat on a woven mat, his sharp eyes studying them as they approached. "You bring darkness with you," he said before they even spoke. Amoka shivered. "Please. I need your help. I was meant to be a sacrifice, but the one who tried to kill me, he's gone. And now the spirits want me instead." The elder nodded slowly. A ritual left incomplete is more dangerous than one that is successful. The spirits do not accept failure lightly. Ikin stepped forward. "Can we break the connection? Make them release her." The elder studied Amoka for a long moment before speaking. "There is a way. But it will not be easy." Amoka straightened. "I'll do anything." The elder's gaze darkened. "You must face the spirits yourself. Enter the realm where they dwell and sever the bond. But be warned, if you fail, you will not return." A cold wave of fear washed over Amoka. Enter their realm. Face them directly. The very idea sent ice through her veins. But she had no choice. "I'll do it," she whispered. The elder nodded. "Then prepare yourself, child. Tonight, you step into the world of the dead." As the final rays of sunlight faded from the sky, Amoka knew she was about to face the most terrifying trial of her life. And there was no turning back. The night air was thick with the weight of the unseen as Amoka sat cross-legged before the elder's shrine, her heart pounding like a drum in the silence. The flickering flames of the oil lamps cast long, jagged shadows against the mud walls, making everything feel more alive than it should be. This was it, the moment that would determine whether she lived or became just another whisper in the night. The spirits were waiting, hungry, restless. The elder, a man whose presence felt more ancient than his years, sat before her, his eyes closed as he chanted softly under his breath. The rhythmic hum of his voice vibrated through the air, sending chills down her spine. Ikin sat beside her, his hand gripping hers tightly. "You don't have to do this alone," he whispered. But she did. This was her burden, her curse to break. "I need to face them," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The elder's eyes opened, dark and knowing. "Once the ritual begins, you will cross into their realm. You must not lose focus. They will try to deceive you, to lure you into a bargain you cannot escape. You must sever the connection and return. If you fail, you will not wake." Amoka swallowed hard. There was no room for fear. "I understand." The elder nodded and reached into a wooden bowl, scooping a thick, dark substance onto his fingers. He pressed it onto her forehead, tracing symbols that burned cold against her skin. "Close your eyes," he commanded. "And listen only to my voice." She obeyed, her breathing slow and measured. The elder began to chant again, his voice rising and falling like waves against a shore. The sound wrapped around her, pulling her under, deeper and deeper, until the world around her dissolved into darkness. When Amoka opened her eyes, she was no longer in the shrine. She stood in an endless void, the ground beneath her an expanse of shifting shadows. A cold wind whispered through the air, carrying voices that spoke in tongues she did not understand. Figures loomed in the distance, their forms flickering like dying flames. And then, she saw them. The spirits. They surrounded her, their eyeless faces turned toward her as they moved in unnatural, gliding motions. The air crackled with energy as one of them stepped forward, its form stretching and twisting until it towered over her. When it spoke, its voice was layered, as though 1,000 souls were speaking at once. "You have come." Amoka's throat was dry, but she forced herself to stand tall. "You said the debt must be paid. I am here to settle it." Laughter rippled through the air, cold and empty. "And what do you offer?" She hesitated. "Not my life." The spirit shifted, circling her slowly. "Then you bring nothing." Panic threatened to consume her, but she fought against it. "Think, Amaka. Think. The spirits wanted balance. They wanted what was owed. If she could not offer a life, then what could she offer? Her mind raced back to what the elder had said. The one who spills the blood is bound to the offering. Sadiq had been taken, but his intent had been to take her. Could that intent be redirected? She took a deep breath. You took Sadiq, she said. He was the one who made the pact. The one who promised you blood. But his life alone did not complete the ritual. The spirits hummed in acknowledgement. He was taken before the offering was fulfilled. The balance was broken. Amaka's pulse quickened. Then let me restore it. The air around her stilled. The spirits watched, waiting. If I can complete what he started in another way, one that does not involve more blood, will you accept it? The spirits murmured among themselves, their whispers rustling like dry leaves. A bargain must be equal. What can be given in place of a life? She thought quickly. What did the spirits desire? What did they crave more than blood? The answer came to her like a spark in the darkness. His soul, she said. Not just his life, but his spirit itself. Bind him to you forever. Make him serve you in ways that no sacrifice of flesh could. He sought power, let him become a servant to it instead. The spirits fell silent. Then, the lead entity shifted closer. A soul for eternity. Yes, she whispered, her body trembling. That is my offering. The shadows around her swirled violently, and for a moment, she thought they would refuse. Then, the spirit extended a hand, if it could be called that, toward her. The pact is sealed. A sharp pain shot through her chest, and the world collapsed around her. Amaka gasped awake, her body convulsing as she sucked in air like a drowning woman breaking the surface. The elder's voice was the first thing she heard, his chants growing softer as he placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. Ikin's face swam into view, his eyes wide with worry. You did it, he breathed. You came back. She sat up slowly, her head spinning. The spirits, they accepted the bargain. The elder nodded, though his expression remained grim. Sadiq's soul is no longer his own. He will wander the void for eternity, serving the very forces he sought to command. A shiver ran down her spine. It was a fate worse than death, but she felt no pity for him. He had made his choice. What happens now? She asked quietly. The elder studied her for a moment. You are free of the ritual. The spirits will not come for you. Relief flooded her, so overwhelming that tears filled her eyes. She had done it. She had survived. Ikin helped her to her feet, his grip firm and reassuring. Let's go home. As they stepped outside, the first light of dawn painted the sky in soft golds and pinks. The air was fresh, untainted by the darkness that had nearly claimed her. For the first time in what felt like forever, she breathed freely. She had walked through death and returned. And now, she would live. Thank you for watching. Did this story remind you of anyone? Please hit the subscribe button, share this story with someone, like the video and tell me about your thoughts in the comment section.